We have a business tip topic today.
And welcome to another edition of the Nerdy Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Pettersen, with my brothers and fellow nerds, AJ and Josh. The script today says brothers and fellow nerds and brothers. So we're brothers twice.
That's your script, bro.
Once. Today we're going to talk about the commission lawsuit that you've probably seen in the news, everything you need to know, why it matters for you. But first, we're going to talk about the Would You Rather of the week, which Josh is very excited about.
Yes.
Would you rather have a house with a slide instead of stairs or a rooftop garden instead of a backyard? And before you ask the question, yes, in order to get upstairs, you have to walk up the slides.
You don't walk up slides, Luke. You run up slides.
You run up slides. Well, it depends.
So I went to the Ninja Warrior gym last week. It's like a warped wall. You have to like run up it real fast and jump and grab the top.
That would be you going to your bedroom every night.
Every night. I get really good at warped walls at that point.
You'd never wear socks.
I actually, took my kids to the Mario movie this weekend, and they have a lot of fun places to get up and down stairs, which is like going through tubes, and they fly around and they go up. So I'm envisioning you would go down cool slides, and then you'd have cool tubes that you can go into that would run you upstairs.
I choose the slide instead of stairs for sure. You want to know why, though?
I want the slide.
It's very practical. A rooftop garden sounds like a big water issue to me.
It would be pretty cool to have a sweet rooftop garden, though. They have them in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I'm also starting to
flat
think,
roofs are a little
better
dangerous.
get a
I'm
good
also starting to
membrane.
think that we should make an invention. It should be a tube that you stand on, and then it just takes you upstairs. Because what Josh is mentioning is in this house. If that's a thing, think about the amount of money
We're
would
getting
make.
rich off
What's that?
selling those.
What's the kid danger? Remember
Danger
they shoot up the tube when they go up the tube. They go to go save the world.
Yes. It would be pretty fun.
What are you taking? Are you taking a slide?
I love slides. I feel like
The reason I'm taking slides too is if you haven't seen it, and I do kind of want to do this someday, but have you seen the videos of the house where you're in the kitchen and in the center island, they like open one of the cabinets and it's a slide to the basement? Have you seen it?
So good.
It's actually really cool.
Sounds so cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a client who created a secret passageway in one of their houses when they did their basement renovation. So these kinds of things are kind of fun, where they have a door in front of their furnace room, and you push on the door, and like a bookcase will fall open. They get to their furnace room from there. But I think I'm going with slide, even though there's a part of me that I love gardening. So it'd be kind of fun to have a rooftop garden, especially if you had a good view coming off that rooftop garden, to just hang out there and garden and have a good, and then have stairs in your house. The other thing is, if you had a slide, like maybe slides wouldn't be so fun if you had to always be sliding.
And walking.
Whereas right now slides are dope, but like if you everywhere you went you had to slide, you'd be like, God, I hate these slides.
And if you had a rooftop garden, you'd kind of have like an inside kind of rain feature every once in a while too. Like
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But
all right, let's get into what actually matters. This commission lawsuit. To start off, can you just tell the listeners, anybody who has been living under a rock, what this is, how it came about initially?
So yeah, it's a few years old. It's been working its way through the legal system. It's gone from state courts, federal courts, kind of all over. Recently got class status.
Yep.
I know. So that's a big deal for them. And it's basically twofold, right? It's trying to change the structure of how things currently happen. And the second thing is it actually has a monetary damages that they're going after, which is like...
That's the real reason why they did it in the first place.
It's in the billions and billions.
So back up, though, and what do you mean trying to change the structure?
So, yes.
For the people who wouldn't necessarily know that initially.
So it's antitrust law. So basically what it's saying is that housing costs are inflated because of the way commissions are paid, which is through the seller, obviously. The big thing with this one is that the local MLSs require that you pay the buyer's agent something, right? And so we've seen in our market that's 2.5 to 3.0% typically. It could be $1, but how the MLSs are set up right now, it can't be zero. Mm-hmm. And so that's the big thing that they're saying is antitrust, because they are forcing the seller to pay a buyer's agent commission.
Yep.
It initially came about, though, because they were also saying that listing agents were not properly giving sellers the option to pay less than like 2.7.
That's what they were arguing in this, is that they've basically been forcing people into a box that is inflating essentially the seller's side fees for the process.
But I do think their legal argument is that even if it was less, it's still antitrust to require the seller to offer a compensation to the buyer's agent on the MLS.
Yep.
And you said this has been going on for a few years. Can you give kind of where it was and where it's at now?
Yeah, it started in 2019. So a legal firm in Illinois, similar to how lawyers tend to be, they saw an opportunity. They filed a class action lawsuit stating the clear cooperation policy, which is what we're kind of referencing here. Requirements to offer buyer broker comp violates the Sherman antitrust law. So it had been going on since 2019. It moved through the courts a little bit and then morphed. So the federal DOJ picked up on it. They started looking into taking further action, and then that ended in January when the DOJ granted NAR's petition to end their inquiry. So that at that point, I think all the agents were starting to feel good that, like, okay, life is going to just keep being the same. But then more recently, a federal judge ruled in favor of moving forward with the class action lawsuit, which is the interesting about that is, like, that could mean like thousands of people just start suing each other for this or get involved in this class action lawsuit. So it's more likely at this point that there may be some changes to the process moving forward, but at the same time, everyone's kind of looking at it going like, is this going to affect the future of this industry? Is it not going to affect the future of this industry? Obviously, we'll talk about better to be prepared than not prepared, but it'll have to play out a little bit more before we know exactly what's going to come out of it.
Sure. And it, again, yeah, it is kind of at the high level right now, so it isn't necessarily affecting agents at the local levels, but moving forward, what are the agents saying? Like, what are they thinking might come of it? What are their opinions at the moment?
Do you mean the agents that know what they're talking about?
The agents that know what they're talking about.
I think, well, we can give everyone's opinion on
everyone's
it.
opinion. I say give both sides, right?
Most of the opinions that I've seen that are commented on social media or articles or whatever are like, this is malarkey, this is super negotiable, and da-da-da-da-da, this is super fair, how we do this. The ones that are paying attention are seeing, like, there could be a real world where the buyer actually has to pay their own agent. And what would that look like? And would that be financed into a mortgage? Would it be out of the buyer's pocket? Is there any way to do this, right? Or is there a seller paid closing cost that actually covers the buyer's agent's commission? And what will it do over time to the commissions on the buy side and the list side? That's not necessarily an opinion, but it's more so like a forward-thinking kind of thought of where is this headed, right?
Yep. And NAR is saying, and their argument is like, well, it says they have to pay a broker comp of something, but all commissions are negotiable, and that's very clear in all of our documents. And so their argument is like, yeah, but you could pay $1 if you negotiate that, and that's all on the table right now. And we've seen that. I mean, we have people that negotiate commissions all the time. And the other thing they're saying is, if you think about it, and this is the biggest challenge here, is that if buyers are paying, the reason why it ever shifted to that, because it used to be different than this.
How I understand is it used to be there was just a listing commission and there were no buyer's agents. So you'd have to go to an open house or reach out to the listing agent to actually see the property.
Right.
But it must have been a while ago, though.
It was far before the internet.
Well, yeah, but even when there wasn't an internet, there were buyer's agents going to the book of listings.
Yeah, it's been a while.
But other countries also do it that way.
Yeah, and so I think the biggest thing is what NAR is arguing is that if you have buyers that have to pay buyers' agents' fees, you're going to have more situations where it becomes unaffordable. So right now, housing pricing for first-time home buyers is also relatively unaffordable. So you're either opening a door for buyers to just be unrepresented and making a big transaction without any support, or you're opening a door where they have to save cash up to pay their agent on the front end, which is going to make it even harder for them to save money for a down payment, for example. And so, I think it's a pretty fair argument on their side to say that, but it's just something that's being considered when you're talking about, like, what are the agents saying? That's NAR's biggest couple of arguments.
Well, it seems like with the amount of press it's getting and the amount of time this has been going on, that something is probably pretty likely to change, whether that's completely abolishing the system we have now or it's just some tweaks to it.
Yep.
It seems pretty possible that we might see some changes. But to Josh's point, I don't think the federal government, which is who's really involved here with this court system, is going to look super great if they're going to basically say, oh, yeah, sorry, first-time home buyers.
You're out.
You got to wait 5 more years before you can buy a house. That's just going to create more and more problems, and it's going to create more investors in the door because the demand's going to be lower, right? So,
yep. And the biggest, honestly, when I look at this whole thing, as someone who's been an agent now for a little bit, but this is kind of what happens when you as a group of professionals, and then speaking to myself in this way, create a perception that you're not doing anything other than just finding a house and getting them into it. Because the argument that they're making right now in the plaintiff side is that with the ability of the internet for people to shop and find their own houses, agents are overpaid because they're not doing as much. And so if the reality is that as an industry, we're just seen as door openers and we're seen as delivering value through just finding a property that might be a fit for them, then they're right. I mean, we're essentially not doing that much, and it's no different than any other industry. So I think that's the one perception that we've created that we have to get rid of, because otherwise you as a buyer's agent are just obsolete.
And I do think that there are buyer's agents that are going obsolete solely based on where the internet's at right now. They literally just don't do anything.
Yep.
And they help people send them houses to go look, and they're getting out of the market because people just aren't going to work with them already before even something like this goes into effect.
Right. The scary thing is, if you think about a world without buyer's agents, and once again, maybe there's a bias here because of what we do, you run the risk of people making a huge financial decision without support. And so maybe you could argue, well, they buy cars without a car shopping agent, but you would think this is a much more complicated transaction, that having support of somebody who actually knows what they're doing would deliver value for them, at least in the moment.
I think the uniqueness of our market, that real estate's not a commodity, is the big change from most other industries like the car industry, right? Like if I look for 10 Ford Explorers today, and I can see the mileage, and I know what it's worth, and there's not a lot that could have happened to that car other than like a terrible crash, or it's completely rusted out, or it's all torn up on the seats and all that. That's going to change the values of it that much, right? So I kind of know what I'm getting into.
And 95% of the time you buy that car and drive it away, it's gone down in value.
Right.
Like just instantly.
It's a depreciating asset.
It typically is how that goes. Let's take out our magic 8 ball here for a second. So let's assume that they decide they win, the class action lawsuit, and buyers agents are no longer getting paid by the sellers, and they're now being paid by their own clients. What is going to change, and what comes about from that?
I think if they allow this to go through, when they say that the change is happening, they're going to have to do a lot of upfront work to make sure that it's not catastrophic. Because like if you do that and say that the listing agent now isn't required to pay a commission, well, maybe in Minnesota they just say we're just going to keep doing it the same way we've been doing it.
Right. There's a world in which they
there.
changed the rules, but the reality of how we operate doesn't really change.
Because from a competition in a fair open market, some sellers might say, well, this gives me a better chance to sell my house. I might make more money.
There are some
buyer's agent.
Really good listing agents that say things like, hey, maybe we should do 8% because I can offer a 4% buy side commission, and that will draw a lot of buyers in.
3% over 2.7. I mean,
right. So I think that's one thing, but I do think in certain places, and I think, again, this is where in Minnesota we're a little more insulated from this stuff, where people have less loyalty. They're more individualistic. I'll say maybe the coasts of the United States. They're just different culturally, right? Like that's just how it is. And if the seller says, I'm not paying a buyer's agent there, then they're going to have to go to the mortgage industry immediately and say, we need to figure out how to make this work. You need to change your guidelines and just allow this with no, hinging on an appraisal or anything like that. Like you need to allow up to 2%, 2.5% to be financed into the mortgage. Because if you don't, like this is going to be bad. I mean, you're going to have a bunch of first-time buyers trying to be unrepresented because they can't afford an agent.
Yep. Yeah, the mortgage thing will definitely happen if this is the route that things change. So first and foremost, this lawsuit just allows people to sue for past damages when they feel like they were misrepresented. So there are probably some people who have said some things that could be under the gun here. I don't know. But in the future, that doesn't necessarily mean that the local MLSs or even in general the different MLSs around the country are going to just say, well, forget it then. We're just going to remove this and make buyer agents. That would be like the last thing
It's a class action, though. That's what's interesting about it is that a class action means you enter into the class, or if you don't want to enter into the class, then you can do your own individual lawsuit. But as a class, they will do one lawsuit together. And so if there's monetary damages with the numbers they're talking about, like these companies will just go bankrupt. They'll cease to exist. It's billions of dollars of commissions.
Do we know who the companies are?
It's the brokerages and NAR.
It's not all of them.
It's not all
Berkshire
of them.
Hathaway, Keller Williams.
But I'm sure they'll pile on. I mean, like
maybe they've added a bunch of them in there.
Yeah.
But that's what's interesting, right? Is if they actually pass that, then they're gonna have to determine how many transactions happen, and they're gonna have to cut checks and mail them out.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see the court piece. Like they could theoretically settle this for think I worked in healthcare for a while. There's an opioid pandemic, and there's a lot of people getting sued for that. And they've essentially settled on a dollar amount and said, well, now you can't sue us anymore. This is the amount we're paying, and this is now over forever.
It's a class thing, right?
But in theory, they could say, okay, we paid this out, but that doesn't mean they have to change their policies going forward. They could just keep where they're going. They just settle this and they're done with it. So there's a lot of different ways this could go. But I do see a future in which it is entirely possible that buyers are paying their own agents. And when I got in this industry, I thought that's the weirdest thing, that buyers don't pay their own agents. But the more you're in it, you kind of understand why.
Here's the only thing that ends up bothering me about the argument of why don't they? And when it's the same thing, on agents say, to have a buyer's agent, it's free, right?
It's not free.
The buyers are paying all of the agents because they're getting a mortgage, and the mortgage is giving sellers the money to pay the agents.
Yes.
They are. So the buyers are paying everybody. They're just paying it over 30 years amortized at the interest rate.
Well, it's kind of lumped into the sales price too.
And that's what's interesting too, right? Like the prices don't just immediately go down, or they would immediately go down if there's no buyer's agent.
Theoretically.
If there's no buyers.
The only sellers that benefit from this are the sellers in the first 6 to 12 months that can capture that 2.5 to 3% not paying a buyer's agent, because after that, it won't.
It's going to price in.
It'll just be priced in.
Well, yeah,
because it's already priced in.
There's a couple questions. Well, it depends on, the question becomes, are we truly delivering the value that we're being paid for? Right? And we talk about this as a team every day. If we as agents aren't doing that, then in theory, there's just fat in the system, and we've taken advantage of the way the commission structures are going.
Sure.
That there is value to be gleaned by changing this process. But if we're truly being worth what we're paying, then people will use us in the future. And it will just change the way in which...
Work with us.
Yeah, whatever. And it will just change the way in which the process works. But the end outcome will either be the sales price will go down and our commissions will go up, or it'll just move the needle up.
And they'll just finance more of it. And
or they'll finance it.
When you talk to people and they talk about for sale by owners, let's say, this is always a conversation.
Yep.
They say, well, the house is worth $100,000 on the open market based on comps on the MLS. And I say, okay, well, you should go tell that person, even if I'm getting paid nothing.
Yep.
Say you go tell that person that 6% is worked into that number. So your house is worth $94,000 with no agents. $97,000 seems like a pretty fair number for you guys to go in at. And the seller is always like, whoa. All the comps say 100. And it's like, well, that's because there was commissions in the deal. You don't get to benefit the full 6% just because you're a for sale by owner.
Yep.
Right? And so that's where I say people will make real-time decisions like that, and it will end up adjusting how things look.
The problem, once again, is perception, though, because the perception is that we're paid too much for what we do.
Absolutely. And so what the perception piece is real, and I totally agree with that. And so I think the one thing that you will see happen, which I think is already they've been talking about tightening on buyer side commissions for a while.
Yep.
That's going to happen to a lot of people in general, I think, in the next 5 to 10 years, just because they are not going to provide enough value.
Yep.
Or they're going to just lose clientele and not be out of the industry completely. It's just the completely removing it doesn't necessarily solve the same problem to me, because I think that is a problem and needs to
unless
be
you can
solved.
create a way to automate away the value of the agent. The other thing, though, think about this: if
we all go to arbitration every year to see where we get paid percentage based on how we did last year.
I mean, think of it this way, though: if this changed and buyers were paying their own buyer's agents, and you were having a lot of buyer's agents that were unrepresented, or buyers that were unrepresented coming in, as a listing agent, you'd probably be like, "I'm not doing this for 3.3 anymore."
No, they would.
I'm charging 4.5,
Exactly.
and the buyer's agent gets 1 to 2. Like, you might see a split where the listing agent versus the buyer's agent goes up, because the amount of effort the listing agent's going to have to do in a world with a lot of unrepresented buyers is going to increase.
What might end up happening is the listing agent, like you said, says sellers, like, I can't do both sides, raises and then gives a smaller amount to the buyer's agent. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So instead of
a
4-2 only
now.
3.5 to the listing agent, it's going to be 4 total, and they get 3 and the buy side gets 1. And they're going to give it themselves. So then the sellers aren't giving the commission, the listing agent's giving the commission.
That's what currently happens.
I know.
But the split between the two would go up. Like, you might be maybe it stays at 6%, but the listing agent now is like, I need 4 because I don't want to deal with a bunch of
unrepresented buyers. And then the buyer's
buyers.
agents would be at their own whim to negotiate with their buyers to get the difference on what we're at now and what they're at.
Yep.
It's interesting. I want to get into the script of the week just because I do like going off on tangents for our opinions because I think that's fun. But
we should be clear, though, that the biggest thing that will happen if this changes and buyers are paying their own agents, because there's no way the government's going to do this and then have it be a problem for first-time home buyers not having affordability, would be the mortgage thing. So mortgages will definitely follow really quickly behind, so you could finance your buyer's agent commission.
Or they will give a tax credit in the first year to cover paying a buyer's agent. I mean, that's what's going to happen. They can't allow this to get so split. It's already a problem.
Right.
The one thing that the agents need to make sure they're doing, like you touched on, the best way to get through this is obviously be aware of it. Don't freak out about it. Continue running your business, but make sure you're adding value to your buyers.
If you're thinking about it, and if you're like, hey, if I was going to be on the market and try to buy something, and I was going to work with me, right? Would I pay me 2%? Would I pay me 3%? Would I pay me? And if you don't think you'd pay yourself that much for what you do, then you got to change what you do to be better.
Would you even work with yourself?
I would.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Would you work with yourself, and how much would you pay yourself?
Right.
Because if you don't think you'd even work with yourself, you should be changing a lot of things.
Yeah, and if you're like, no, I would pay myself, and be like, okay, if you're gonna go buy a car, how would you do it? Would you? And you're like, and think from someone else's perspective. That's
love that.
Like considering your services, whether or not you actually are worth what you're getting paid.
I love that. Script of the week. So you run a team, maybe the advisory realty group, perhaps. And your agents are, let's just say, they read the news, they see all the headlines, they're getting worried about it.
Sorry, for a second, can we talk about the brokers, what they're going to do? Because they're already getting pummeled.
Yeah,
they're going to get. They would get absolutely destroyed by this.
They might. The class action lawsuit could destroy them if it's big enough.
Well, think about how many buyer deals that they just wouldn't have in a theoretical world where it's one side versus two on every deal. And think about like how their split models have changed, and think about how they continue to change if the agents get compressed. Because the agents are going to be like, I need more because I'm getting paid less now. The broker model already is almost upside down. It's going to get flipped completely if that happens.
It would not be good.
So anyway, sorry, that would be a second.
Seems like it's a bad
thing
time
we have to look at.
in the economic environment to do something like this that would flip the real estate industry that runs a lot of the economic.
It's funny, as an agent, I'm less worried about it than I would be if I was a broker.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So
Okay, so you run a team and your agents are a little bit worried about this because they see the headlines. How can you explain this to them to make sure they not only, one, can talk about it and understand it and know what it is, but also to calm their worries a little bit?
I would say, we have no idea what the outcome of this is going to be, right? And you have to think about it in far less absolutes than the world wants you to think about it, which is it's either going to be exactly the same as it is now or it's going to be abolished and we're going to change everything entirely, right? The likely outcome is something far more in between. And to your point, the biggest thing that you can do right now, if you don't want to get eliminated as a buyer's agent, is just be a really freaking good buyer's agent. Know houses, know markets, know how to negotiate, know the contract ins and outs, know how to help people get the house they need at the right price, because you won't be obsolete if the value you're delivering is equal to the commission you're being paid or greater.
Send them actual houses they might like on the market. It's a novel concept.
right. What I'd say is things are never as good as they seem and are never as bad as they seem, right? We are very tragic when things are bad, and we think things are the best thing ever when things are good. But the reality is, AJ's point is going to land somewhere in the middle. Also, if you're a buyer's agent, like mostly right now, keep being a really good buyer's agent and building up a client base, because there's still business to be had on the listing side. And you're not going to probably stay a buyer's agent forever. What we tell our team is like, do a bunch of buyer transactions when you're new, build a client base, and then work really well with your sphere. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, go back to our business tip about how to engage with your sphere, because those will turn into seller agent clients down the road. And they're still going to have to pay somebody. So, if you want to be a good listing agent, be a really good buyer's agent first so you can build a business, and then follow up with those people to make sure that you can get those clients down the road.
That's all we have this week for the Nerdy Agent podcast, unless AJ has one more note. He does not. I did want to toss a small plug in here from our only sponsor, the Advisory Realty Group. We are in the Twin Cities, and we are the three of us, along with a few other agents, run this team, and we are adding agents rapidly right now. So if you are in the Twin Cities, you aren't happy with your current situation, you want to learn how to add more value, feel free to send us a message on any of the social media platforms. You can find an email, I'm sure, on our podcast link somewhere as well. And as always, remember, be better.
Bye.